Welcome to Archways Threads, a show focusing on the threads of family and recovery support services that help make up the tapestry of life in recovery. Join us as we share stories from peers and participants in the field and practice of peer recovery support and family support and strengthening. And now, your host, Archways CEO, Michelle Lennon.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to episode 3 of our podcast for peer recovery support specialists and family support specialists. We are finishing up our conversation with Cheryle Pacapelli, Project Director for the state-supported recovery centers throughout the state of New Hampshire. And we are so excited that you're back with us. Please, if you have missed episode 1 and 2, go back so you get the full benefit of the conversation we had with Cheryle. Thank you so much for being with us. Take care. Sometimes I wonder about, the brain changes, that sometimes substance use is problematic and it's behavioral, and sometimes it's problematic and then the disease of addiction is accompanying the problematic use. Yeah. And so people can't stop without some type of medical support. And we kind of see everything in between on the continuum if we look at it. But I think like the abstinence-only mindset has come out of the 12-step tradition, largely because that was the only thing people had to support them for so long.
Exactly.
So it's not a bad thing.
No.
At all.
What sometimes scares me is that I came in through an abstinence-based recovery. And I have learned over the years to support harm reduction. What gets me scared is when someone enters recovery in an abstinence-based recovery, and then they decide, which they can, to do a harm reduction model. Mm-hmm. It has not always worked out well. And so trying to balance, those things, and this is like for the recovery center staff is where, I find the biggest, early in recovery, why am I doing abstinence and helping people who are being successful at harm reduction? Why can't I? And there's a reason, right? I would not succeed at a harm reduction model. Mm-hmm. If I had one drink, I'm going to have 100. So but it takes years of brain healing, like you said, to understand that.
Yes.
So that I can make the choice every day. Mm-hmm. That I'm just not going to drink today.
Yeah.
Right. So
my husband and I have had many conversations about this because his addiction has been to opiates. Yep. And because of the number of surgeries he's had, he's often been prescribed opiates that have led him down to problematic use again.
Yep.
And this last time he had hip surgery, he had to make the decision to tell the surgeon, I cannot go home with opiates.
Right.
And part of that was basically ultimatums given to him because every time it hasn't done, he hasn't done well. And he had to make that decision. But he has told me about he calls it the voice of his addiction.
Yeah.
And what you were talking about, harm reduction, he's like, the voice of his addiction would say to him, it worked for him. Maybe it'll work for you, and he's like, but it won't. And he's discovered that because of the surgeries that he's had. And I think it's a tough thing, right? Because each individual really has to answer that for themselves. But when addiction is a voice in your head, kind of, and I know some people hate that idea of giving it like human values, right? Because it's the disease. And it's your internal voice talking, right. But it's influenced by the disease that you carry. Right. If you have the disease model going on in your brain. And I firmly believe that's true for my husband, just because of where we've been in the history of his addiction.
And, it's amazing, how resilient your brain is, yeah. And also how not forgetful it is. Because I was 21 years in recovery and never used an opiate until I was in the hospital for pancreatitis. And I was on unlimited opiates for 4 days. And it took me 4 months for my brain to not want an opiate every single day.
Yeah.
Every single day. And had they, at 20 years in recovery, I hadn't used anything. Mm-hmm. Had they sent me home with 30 of these opiates, I definitely would have used them.
Yeah.
But I asked them,
Scary.
send me home with one.
Yeah.
And I knew if the pain came back, I could use it. But I would lay in bed at night and think about that one pill after just 4 days.
Yeah.
Like people use opiates for years and we want them to get better in 30 days.
Right.
It's insane.
Yeah.
So
And it's scary. My daughter had an appendectomy locally at a local hospital, and she was going to be given opiates after her surgery in the recovery room. And I was there when she woke up, and her father was there, and the nurse was about to give her opiates and the IV. And I asked her, hold on, what are you doing? And she looked at me like I was a bad mother.
Right.
She's like, she just had major surgery. And so I asked my daughter, I said, honey, I said, you know what opiates have done to our family. I said, are you in that much pain that you need it? And she's like, I don't think so. And I said, and then the doctor, he was kind of like drying his hands after washing them at the sink. And he comes over and he looks her in the eyes, and he's like, would you like a little bit of Tylenol to take the edge off? She's like, I think I'm good. She, a little laparoscopic surgery she had. She ended up having Tylenol later. But I think still in certain situations, the medical field, dental field, because dental, we've seen, unfortunate circumstances in our own community of losing a young person. And it started with opiates after a tooth pull. That addiction can take root in the brain very quickly.
yeah.
And that's the one thing people don't realize is like, we don't choose our physiology and how it's going to react. And we don't change, we don't choose how our brain is going to react to these chemicals. And like 13% of the population will end up addicted due to these substances.
Right.
And we tend to think, well, I won't be one of those
13%.
13.
Yeah.
But when you take a group of 100 people, and this is what I used to do. I used to imagine the kids at the high school, that out of the 300 people, that's a whole lot of kids.
Yeah.
That would be susceptible to this. And we're still not providing the education of how dangerous this stuff can be.
Right.
And, I had the opportunity to train Head Start workers in the state of Massachusetts because they were feeling certain types of way about supporting families affected by addiction. And so there was a woman in the technical division of Head Start that wanted training. And I was really privileged to work with Care and Welfare to kind of roll out some training on supporting families affected by substance use. And there was a woman who came up to me after a training saying she had knee surgery, and she remembers in between doses, like she couldn't wait to get to the next dose because she was feeling like achy all over her body. And she's like, I am looking back and I'm looking at these symptoms, and she's like, oh my goodness, I was getting those sweats.
I was in withdrawal.
Starting, the withdrawal process. And so, the conversation that I had with her is you want to be real careful in the future and make sure you stop, as soon as you possibly can.
Right.
Because once that happens, that addiction has taken root in the brain, there's like no turning back from that.
Right.
And I think that's something people don't realize. I think that's one of the reasons why the continuum of care, getting recovery focus is so important, because, you look at acute care and it might be 30 days, 90 days, whatever the length of a program might be, but recovery is the rest of your life.
Right.
And we talk about like cancer, you have that 5-year checkup, even if you've been in remission for a while. We don't treat addiction the same way.
Right.
When those checkups could be really important to keep people safe,
Yep.
I think about that, like this recovery oriented, and what does that mean? Is it's really looking at living.
Right. And like, what are we doing for people with 5 years of recovery that want to buy a house or, have a real job now, not a get well job, and need to learn how to budget so they can get a car and things like that? How do we teach them about having a retirement plan?
Yeah.
Like things like that. Those are our next phases of this as, we get out of the crisis of the opiate epidemic.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about that at our centers, because what we have seen is our peer recovery support workers starting to get caught up and only taking care of the crisis.
Right.
And kind of discharging people because they haven't been around for 6 weeks or something.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, well, hold on, because, we tend to work at stabilization, right?
Yep.
When people come out of treatment, okay, We need to find some type of
Housing,
income for to pay for housing. We need to make sure you're not struggling with food insecurity. So hook up to those right resources. But still, like, we don't want people to just survive,
Right.
and I do think about, there was an old slide in the Recovery Coach Academy that CCAR put out that showed people's connection, that when they get into active addiction, like their life course trajectory kind of takes a dive.
Yeah.
But if they connect to recovery support services, they don't just get to where they started, they can go even further.
Right.
And we have seen that time and time again with the people that have stayed connected.
Right.
But a lot of people drop connection right after the crisis is over.
We see that a lot.
Yeah.
And especially when you're serving families,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they have the crisis with their spouse, their child, their uncle, their grandchild. And as soon as that person stabilizes, they don't need any more help when we know they do.
Yeah.
So trying to keep them engaged is hard.
Yeah, we've been talking about that and kind of like revamping that telephone recovery support system to kind of get to that more recovery oriented,
Yeah, long
term check-ins.
Yeah, just hey, care about you.
Yeah.
To see how you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah. So one of the things I love to ask guests, if there was like one actionable item that you would like people in recovery, people providing recovery support services, family support specialists working with families affected by addiction, if you had like one message for them as a peer in recovery yourself who has been doing this work for a long time, what would you think it would be?
So it would be for me to be patient because I, as someone struggling with substance use, want immediate gratification in things. So I want things to happen quickly. Like everyone agrees this is a great idea. Like, why aren't we doing it? Like, and sometimes you have to step back and work within this system that we have to continue to push that agenda forward. And it takes a lot of patience and you just can't give up. Don't ever give up. Don't ever stop carrying the message. Just keep doing it in whatever venue it is that you can do it in. But I never thought that 20 something years from when I started this, we would still be trying to get people to believe in peer recovery support.
Yeah.
But they believe more than they did 20 years ago, right? So, and one of the things that was told to me early on was when Susan B. Coleman started the Foundation for Breast Cancer, when she started it, people didn't say the word breast and cancer in the same sentence. And it took her 25 years to do that. And, we're on the cusp of 25 years of this movement, and we have made huge progress. There's many more people in recovery today than 25 years ago. So,
over 27 million people in recovery today.
Yep. And I think when I started, it was 21 or 21.5 million. So, so that's an amazing impact.
It is. And one other question I wanted to ask you, how do you deal with the losses? Because we have lost some amazing friends over the years, you and I both. And I was thinking about how, for me, I have to box up my feelings and kind of put them on a shelf. And then I take them out and I look at them every once in a while and I have my crying jags at home. Or just recently, I was in the process of packing up one of my offices because I'm moving to a new location right now. And I came across a t-shirt that somebody gave me who's no longer with us. And I came across a little piece of paper that was just a cutout. I was doing a project at one point, putting pictures into frames, and he had cut out the frame size that I had with a little note, and just seeing his handwriting, I just lost it. Just lost it. And I was thinking about how I do have a pretty hardened heart at this point. And I think about the difference between open wounds that just kind of scab over and then the scars. And I feel like I have a lot of scars, that I can look at and appreciate, like the life of Dean Lemire and what his impact on my life was. And I miss him. And sometimes get choked up.
I know.
but there are a lot of deans in my life. You know, there are a lot of people that have had some great impact. Guys that lived with me, you know, before licensing was a thing. My house was like a respite for a little while there, and so proud of the guys that have made it. Like, I know one of the guys that stayed with us. You know, he's married, he's got 2 kids, he's got a job, he's been in recovery. I think he said for 8 years this week or a couple weeks ago. And then I remember the losses too, because opiate addiction takes a lot of people, you know, over 400 and something people
every year.
That's when you think about that, that's like a 9/11 every 2 days in our country. And we are still not really attacking it the way you would want.
Yeah. So, you know, I have some pictures on my refrigerator of some of those people or in my office. And I kind of do things like football teams do. Like I touch Dean Lemire's picture every time I go by it. And I say, you know, I'm going to do this for you. Or Abby Lazatz, who's in my office, and say, you know, we're not giving up. We're going to keep doing this for you. And that's kind of how I do it, because it's amazingly hard. Like, and you kind of, at least for me, I kind of get callous to it and don't want to be that, because that's not who I am. But it's the only way to keep doing this work, I think.
Yeah, because I mean, the burnout rate is very high.
Very high.
Yeah. And I always joke when I see, you know, Eric Moran up at Whitehorse, like we're the only 2 new originals left now.
Yeah.
You know, we recently had a staff member that had been there, you know, from the beginning with me, kind of move on now for the same reason, you know, just burnt out, you know, and she kind of moved around positions for a while trying to hang in there, and found it was the best thing, you know, was to move on. And, you know, I'm blessed that she's still a friend of mine. We went to breakfast today, you know? But just thinking about how it's so important for some of us to hang in there because of the history, you know, and I was thinking about that and staring with you, like feeling like some of the history is being lost. But now that we have this Office of Recovery, you know, hopefully a lot of this will be recorded for posterity, you know. And definitely appreciate those that have hung in there, but to completely understand those that have moved on. You know, and that's something else. Like, I think, you know, sometimes people get really excited in the trainings that we do about doing peer support, but for some people, this is just a chapter in their story. And like, once they, you know, enter recovery, like they should go and live life and thrive and potentially leave it behind them. And that's okay.
And it's just like, whenever I train, like I train it with no expectation, right? Because now I have 30 people who are learning something they didn't learn. They didn't know, they didn't understand about the disease. They didn't understand about how to interact and love someone through it, whether it's their loved one or themselves.
It's that healthy boundaries. I mean, that was one thing my husband and I went through. I think that really helped our family survive was me having support from the recovery community to set those healthy boundaries that kind of protected our family, our house, our finances, things like that, while supporting him to get the help he needed at the same time, you know? Yeah.
So
this was a lot. And
just, we're in 100-degree room. So.
I did for New Hampshire. It's been an unusual heat wave. So Cheryle, thank you so much for being with us and for sharing some of your wisdom. I hope to have you back on the show down the road sometime, because of course you're a wealth of knowledge, not just in the overall center stuff, but in all kinds of aspects of peer support. So again, thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you next time on Archways Threads.
Bye. Thank you for having me, Michelle.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Archways Threads. If there is a topic you'd like to see us cover, email us at podcast@archwaysnh.org or call us at 603-960-2128. Visit our website at archwaysnh.org to learn more about the Archways family of recovery and family resource centers.